Thanks, Liz. It is a pleasure to be here, especially at the invitation of Laila. I'm quite a little surprised because I thought that everybody forgot New Delhi Declaration. So when she first told me in Delhi that during her recent visit that she is going to organize a workshop on World Water Day on Some for All, I said, oh. Because the problem is this, one thing she has carefully hidden in my introduction is that during this 30 years, I have occupied all sides of the table. I was in fact the head of the Government of India Rural Water Supply Programs at the time when it was organized. And in that capacity, I was chairman of the drafting committee. Then I was in UNICEF, then WSSCC, now in NGO. So you can, if anything can be blamed, I can be squarely blamed in this whole group because I'm part of the policy making, implementation, non-implementation, failures and everything. So we have a saying in India that when the thief leaves the house, then you become wise. So I'm a wise person now. But I should tell you the how that New Delhi took place. It was conceived in a very interesting place in the sea beach of Recife in Brazil. Because we were organizing, I mean not we, the WSP and UNDP organized one of those regional seminars in Recife, and they wanted me to present the India's program there. So I was there, and in one of the early morning while jogging on the beach, I must remember the 4 or 5 persons who conceived it. Martin Baer from UNICEF, Shaul Al-Sarraf from World Bank, David Gray from WSP, myself and Frank Hartwell from UNDP. So we thought that 1.5 years to go now for ending of the international decade. What is the lessons learned? Why can't we have a consultation somewhere which can distill the lessons for the first international decade on water and take it further, because in the UN system everything will stop in 1990. So that was one of the reasons for not only for learning the lessons but also a selfish reason for UN agencies to continue beyond the decade and getting some kind of an endorsement for continuation of the work. This always happens. You remember, whenever there is a conference, whenever there is an occasion to meet, besides the learning process, there is a hidden agenda there. So one of the hidden agenda is how to continue the momentum of the decade beyond 1990. The task on me was to sell it to Government of India, because Government of India doesn't care whether the decade ends or not. So I went back to government and tried to sell the concept. He said, why should we host it? Why should we waste our money in hosting this conference? Let UN organize anywhere in the world. So the first thing, of course, I had to say, blah, blah, that, you have done some wonderful work, or we have done some wonderful work that will be showcased to the world, which is always done. John is expert on that in showcasing things and lessons learning to the other people. But then they came back with a very interesting statement to me, and that's why the Some for All rather than More for Some came up. He said that you have to just exactly the basic policy motto of Government of India, right or wrong, and that we should force it down the throat of UN. So myself and David Gray, we coined this one. And when we coined this, a lot of things behind this was that it is not merely the drinking water supply sanitation. In fact, I would openly say that this was the basic of integrated water resource management. The concept was, it is not only drinking water, the water resource which is finite and water resource which is definitely not able to meet with this demand and supply situation. If it is taken from the hand of the poor, forget about drinking water, the entire development will stop. It is one of the key resources. You remember in 50s, we were all obsessed with the land reform, and correctly so. So this was really the beginning of the water reform, that's what we thought of. But unfortunately, as you can see from the slogan itself does not allow it to be extended to sanitation. You can have some for all for water rather than more for some. How can you say that sanitation you should have some for all rather than more for some? So I accept this particular consultation. It is a consultation. It was not a conference, event conference. It was a consultation, and this consultation was 90% focused on water. It was spoken also 90% on water, but there are hidden words, there are issues which have been kept there, including the issue of solid and liquid waste management, which is actually comes in sanitation. Now, interestingly, although the Water Supply Sanitation Collaborative Council and the first session rightly so, whether it is a planned or is accident, three of us connected with the WSSCC, it was technically organized by UNDP, Government of India, co-hosted. Why I'm highlighting this, but co-sponsored by UN Steering Committee and WSSCC. Now you can ask a question, WSSCC was not born, but then how WSSCC could co-host it? You know, WSSCC was already there as ESA Collaborative Council. It started as External Support Agencies Collaborative Council, and it was supposed to transform into the WSSCC on that occasion, and rightly so. You know, in fact, very wisely it was thought of that we need a collaborative mechanism, an independent platform on which beyond the UN agencies, we should have everybody, an individual, an NGO, a research organization, academic institution on the platform, and then, you know, the leaders of the UNs thought that the UN Steering Committee, which is very, very closely closed, you know, kind of a group among these UN agencies and the World Bank, should be expanded and WSSCC should take over. And WSSCC should play the role of coordination during the decade of 1990 to 2000. Whether it happened or not, then we have to look at it, but that was the reason. It was formally co-sponsored by WSSCC. And when it was, the UN, the New Delhi statement was endorsed by, it is the only statement which was endorsed by United Nations General Assembly in December 1990. It specially recognized the role of WSSCC for continuing that coordination. So, goal, there was a clear period, and there were very interesting statements which scattered up, taken up from the statement. First of all, political commitment is essential. So water is not beyond politics or macroeconomics very much plays a role on water. The awareness, mobilization of all sections of the society, 20 years passed, but the principles are still valid, and identified the need of IWR much before Delhi and Dublin. But the issue is this, why, of course Laila has touched a few points, why it really didn't so successfully put a stamp on the UN policies for a number of reasons. In fact, you know, I was very much expecting Richard to be there in that conference. Unfortunately, he couldn't come because on the same month, the majors, in the first time, the Jim Grant organized the Children's Summit. And the Children's Summit was such a landmark, you know, it was really taken over by a lot of the heads of the states actually attended that because of that reason. Now, if you see the challenges identified in the New Delhi statement, the first one is very, of course, you can say that both David Gray and myself, we are background is in geology and geohydrology, but the depletion and degradation of water resource was very highlighted. So there is a concern about the conservation of the source. And of course, it is a jargon, need of a fundamentally new approach, but it has also realized that the approach which is being taken will not be able to take us to the goal. It identified the need of profound institutional, economic and social changes. Now when I say that institutional changes, it also has so much things written inside. It includes the decentralization, it includes the local institutional development, not necessarily for water organization or water utilities. It is closely connected with the decentralization of the local management, because whether you go to the presently 3-tier of India's Panchayati Raj, for example, when we went to the South Africa during this cholera epidemic in South Africa, one of the greatest weakness we found that while it is very strong in the national level, it almost doesn't exist at the local level and local level administrations. So it is the decentralization capacity building local level. The identification of the news of huge finance mobilization, as back in 1990, we calculated that we need at that time 5 times more the sectoral finance movement. Through a substantial reduction in cost service and additional funds from existing and new sources, including government donors and consumers. Now, interestingly, I'd like to highlight one point here. During the water decade, there are 2 areas where very strong collaboration took place between the United Nations agencies. And there was no absolute dispute on that. That one, provide water or bring the technologies at a very reasonable, appropriate cost, and try to reduce the cost through better improvement of technology, better operation management, better decentralization, production at local level. And the other side also, it was always thought that the state governments or the national governments will play a lead role in providing the core funding, but then you create a kind of a snowball effect for raising the fund from community and others. Now, there was no dispute on that, and everything, whether you have these issues about the community participation or Laila, you just tell me when you have a so, unfortunately, when we see this at the end of this New Delhi statement, we found that, it was just left to the country leadership without any capacity, just telling them that you go ahead and do it now. This is our wisdom, and you go ahead and implement yourself. Now, why the confusion started from 1990? And this is most important issue. Because as we coming closer to the decade, and this is the politics both inside the donors as well as outside, there was a kind of a little bit of rumbling that water is taking too much of time and money, and there was a kind of a pressure within each donor group that you have to reprioritize your agenda. And 1990, so many new things are coming in. So as a result, what happened, instead of have that collective action, the collective action of the donors through a few UN agencies, like, at the time one of the major landmark was the formation of the WSP, which was the UNDP World Bank goal. And in the case of 1990 to 2000, they all started diverging from each other. One of the reasons the divergence started is, of course, Dublin, you can say. Now, why Dublin? The politics behind Dublin was that at the end of this decade, we were coming to a conclusion that water is not an issue of engineers. It is a more issue of the social scientist, economist, and science. And at the time, that push and simplification took place by saying water is an economic good and everything can be sorted out by the engineering solutions. And that is where Dublin was successful and also failed. It was successful because the engineering group failed, that they were left out of decade, and end of the decade conference also they were giving lesser priority. So they came back with vengeance in Dublin, and also the famous statement that water is an economic good. And there is a lot of debate on that. I will not touch this because Laila has already touched it. The other issues which were touched in New Delhi conference was statement, right? One is the emphasis on South-South cooperation, which really didn't take place. Because there are a lot of things to learn from South-South, which really didn't take place. The research and development almost stopped. The focus on governance was never there. It was more on micro-level management. People changed the focus in. And unfortunately, the water group as a whole, and this is very sad, got really isolated from the major policy, macrofinance and fiscal and planning levels. Nowhere any of the conferences, you can see a major finance person, planning person, or any sector person. For example, water, why we are trying to provide safe water? We say that because of health. Where are the health people in the conferences? They're never there. Where are the education people? One of the statements in New Delhi statement is that education is a key issue for communication. They're never there. So it is only you scratch each other's back. You know, it's a 80% people or 90% people, the converts talking to each other. I mean, what is the use of it? So water never came out of the closet. It never came out as a central developmental issue like forestry or even the power, for example, has occupied it. I mean, we should really look at it. Why the power reforms are successful in the poor areas or poor countries, and why the forestry, in spite of all the problems, have been successful there. And this is really one of the major problems there. And as Laila rightly pointed out, there is the increasing urbanization has really created huge challenges which was not focused in the decade much. Now, there are huge gaps in the statements also. For example, there was no clear mention on the role of private sector. I mean, we coined the phrase of private-public partnership, but most of the cases it is nothing but CSR, is a corporate social responsibility, giving some money for just implementing some programs here and there. But really playing the role of private sector. In the decade, private sector played a very important role. Jointly with the UN organization, UNICEF, UNDP, World Bank, developing the hand pump, in my opinion, is one of the most important public-private partnership. And it has been taken over in the open market. Why it has not been done in these cases? And over-dependence on the role of the government, although recognizing the fact that government will play the role of promoter and facilitator, and even now it is continuing the over-dependence on the role of the government. The role of the UN agencies remain very vague, and not only the roles, but also the responsibilities. And most of the time, they were guided by their own roles and own responsibilities, rather than the sectoral importance. And discontinuation of the steering committee and replacement by WSSCC did not fill the gap. The reason simply, WSSCC did not get the endorsement of the top level of the UN leaders, which rather we tried to bring in there, but it remained a closed technical group, but not more than that. So even when the UN leaders came in there, even then there was a competitions and fight remained, because when the donors fund shrinking, everybody is fighting for that same fund. So as a result, what happened, that collective action of the decade got lost. Laila has mentioned we had a plethora of global conferences. And if you go to any of the places, and if you just do one research of finding the common denominators, you will find the same statements have been packaged in different way. But the poor have no voices in those places. This is the last slide, and the issues unresolved. And I still didn't have any solution for that. Possibly the research and others can find solutions on that. Have you found out, can you tell me, I'm not in touch very recently, that any art moving technology developed on water supply which reduces cost and which can be managed by the people at local level? Why? I am originally from the mining sector. We can do the beneficiations with the biochemistry. Why new technologies are not being developed here? It is still the same, the old Roman technology of the water distribution and water treatment of oxidation. I mean, Duncan is here, John is here. I mean, have we found any new nanotechnology or something to be applied for this water treatment? And remember, with the increasing of urbanization, your cost of urban water distribution in traditional methodology is extremely high, which no developing country can afford. Even in future, the cities like New York won't be able to afford. Environmental issues, including pollutions due to poor sanitation technology, is one thing looming large. Yes, we are promoting sanitation, we are getting the figures. What is the study that all the pit latrines are doing on the nitrate level on the ground? Are we creating another arsenic problem? I don't know. There has to be some look into this. We talk about participatory management, but really institutionally, the institutional building, have you done it properly? I mean, we say the local level should have the power, but do they have the power for getting the capital? Basically, we have not touched the issue of demand-supply management. Your 80% of the water is taken by agriculture, and agriculture is polluting most of this water, and they are politically much more powerful. Where is the model? IWRM people, have they given any model on that? And governance at all level, capacity again at all level, and coordination at all level. There are 18 departments in Delhi which deals with water. The Water Resource Ministry has no control on any one of them. And last but not the least, the role of private sector. I think I am raising the questions. I have not found the solution, and possibly I will go to the grave also without the solution. Find it out quickly. Thank you.